the grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it.
Hmm.
And so Joe has always taken the initiative in watering our relationship. He has not left the relationship up to me. He's taken ownership of our relationship.
Hi, you're listening to the Zan Tyler podcast.
When my family started our homeschooling journey, there were so many decisions to make, but one of our best decisions was choosing to use BJU Press Homeschool. I've never seen my kids so excited to get textbooks before. I'm amazed by how interesting and interactive the lessons are. My kids actually look forward to them. We use the online video lessons for all our courses, but I know some families choose to teach from the textbooks. What I love is that I can trust BJU Press to uphold our values. The Bible and biblical principles are woven throughout each subject. I'll admit, I was a bit nervous when I started homeschooling, but I've found a wonderful online community of other BJU Press homeschool families and consultants. The Homeschool Hub also makes my job easier. I can set up our schedules and rearrange them with just a few clicks. On the dashboard, I can see each of my kids' progress, and the assignments page shows me quickly what's ready for me to check or grade. I'm glad my son's biology assignments are automatically graded. BJU Press Homeschool has given us the tools and confidence to homeschool our children. For more information, do what I did and visit the BJU Press Homeschool website or talk with your local HomeWorks consultant.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Zan Tyler podcast, where our goal is to help you thrive on your homeschooling journey. Let me take just a minute to ask you to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen. And if this podcast has been encouraging to you, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps us. We're available on YouTube now, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, where we have even more content and great reels. So today I have a very special guest with me, my husband, Joe. We just celebrated another anniversary, and we want to talk about marriage. Marriage has been under attack in our culture, and we have had many years of marriage, most of them happy, as Joe says. And so we have 3 children and 8 grandchildren and many years of marriage. So we want to talk today about how to keep your marriage strong, especially as homeschooling families. I think homeschooling can introduce a whole new level of stress into a marriage, and it can be your greatest joy if you learn to work at it. So welcome, Joe.
Oh, it's great to be here. So Zan and I really enjoy speaking on marriage at conferences. It's always great to look out and see couples sitting there side by side, and sometimes as we talk and tell stories, you'll see one of them elbow the other one. So that's always a lot of fun.
So I wanted to start because Joe and I have recently celebrated an anniversary, and it seems like the more we talk to couples, the more stress we realize they're under because of the culture, because we have a lack of really reverence or respect for marriage today. And so we just wanted to share from our hearts what our marriage has been like. Joe and I got married. I was 21. He was 22. I had just graduated from college. I had been committed definitely to a career, and Joe ruined my plans when he proposed to me because he was my best friend. I couldn't imagine life without him, but I'd always said there were 2 things I'd never do in life: teach or have kids. So God really worked in my heart and just let me know that he was calling me to be a wife and a mother at that point in my life. And so Joe and I got married. Like I say, I just graduated from college. Joe had a year left. And we were really committed to having a marriage that honored Christ. And it's good to have those visions and goals. And then you get into the marriage itself. We waited 9 months after we got married to have children. So because Joe and I had such a great relationship, we had been such close friends for 4 years when we got married, I really felt like the marriage was no adjustment. But then we had children so early, and that was a huge adjustment. I can remember, and then I want Joe to talk for a few minutes, but I can remember when it was at a bridal shower, and my old youth director my former youth director, gave a devotion on marriage. And she said something that just shouted at me. She said, marriage is really hard work. At this point, our relationship was so good and we were looking so forward to marriage. I couldn't imagine that marriage was hard work. And then you have kids and you really realize the work is just beginning. And so something you say, Joe, that means so much to me is that the grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it. And so Joe has always taken the initiative in watering our relationship. He has not left the relationship up to me. He's taken ownership of our relationship and makes sure that things are going well, and when they're not, he really helps to correct those things. So I do want to say that marriage is hard work and you have to commit yourself to it and you have to water that grass. But you also need to take time to enjoy each other in the midst of homeschooling and little children and all the financial responsibilities, everything you're juggling. You've got to stop and enjoy each other. So this really came home to me. We were at a national homeschooling conference and they had, there was a pastor who spoke on marriage and he made everyone take this love test. It kind of drove Joe crazy because it was the thing where he asked, do you love your wife more today than you loved yesterday? Well, that's really not the terms in which Joe thinks. So you want to tell him about the love test?
Yeah, so I think the love test had kind of, bizarre questions from my perspective because they were, how life is. I mean, you have good days of ups and days of downs, and asking a question like, do you love your wife more today than yesterday? I knew these questions would be shared publicly, and these answers may be shared publicly. So I answered according to what I knew the answer should be. That didn't work out too well for me in school, but I knew on the love test it would work out. So we were sitting around the table with that evening dinner after taking the love test earlier that morning. And everybody was sharing how they did on the love test. And everybody looked at me and said, hey.
Well, all the men had failed.
Miserably.
Steve and Jim said, okay, Tyler, we failed the love test. How'd you do?
So we made like a 92 or something. We aced the love test. So Zan and I had a great afternoon together, whereas these other couples were busy hashing out all their issues.
So the funny thing was, they looked at Joe after we had this discussion about him acing the love test, and they failed it. They said, Tyler, how did you ace that love test? And he said, we've been married long enough to know when to lie and when to tell the truth.
Yes. I guess that means temporary mutual lying for the greater good. It's okay.
Well, I think the moral of that story is there are times to really work out things in your marriage, and there are times to really enjoy each other.
Yeah.
And we were on a trip away from our children, which didn't happen much, and we just wanted to have fun with each other.
Right. Yeah. We weren't interested in any marriage psychology at that point. It's funny, later on, as we would get a babysitter, we would decide up front over dinner, okay, we're going to talk about the kids or not, because it's easy to spend your every minute. That's right. Instead of dating. And I think husbands need to really continue to pursue their wives. Christian men especially work so hard at this early on, and then they get married and then they stop dating, and that makes no sense. Now, I know it's a challenge. It's a challenge if you have a bunch of kids and trying to figure out, how to work that out. Hopefully you'll have relatives nearby, but if you find yourself in the situation where you don't, I bet you've got close friends that have the same predicament. And no doubt you can switch off, but there's one other option too, is to find usually a teenager that can drive is a great cost-efficient way to continue to date your wife, because they make great babysitters.
So, one thing I did this year was after our anniversary, I decided I would sit down and write out the 10 top things that I love most about Joe. And I would encourage you to do those things. So here is what I wrote down. His sense of humor, because I tend to overthink everything and take everything seriously. I learned how to laugh, relax, and tell a story from Joe. He is truly the definition of a servant leader. He is always putting everyone else in the family first. He has been faithful, supportive. He loves to travel. He loves nature. I was always an inside girl until I married Joe, and he's taught me the beauty of nature. I love that he's taught Sunday school and Bible studies on marriage and family, and that he's an elder in our church. I love that he has studied me. He talks about studying your wives and knowing love language and knowing spiritual gifts and knowing what makes me tick. So I just want to thank you for all of those things. And I want to encourage you as women to take time out to write down what it was that attracted you to your husband in the beginning and what you love about him. Because we have a tendency to blame our husbands for everything that goes wrong in our lives. And we can't do that. We need to learn to trust in the Lord. Our husbands aren't God. They can't read our minds as much as we think they should be able to read our minds. And they're not our girlfriends either. So I just want to encourage you to really love your husbands and respect your husband, just like you want to be loved and respected then.
Wow. Thanks. I don't know that I deserve all those, but, the thing that drew me to you, other than your basic good looks, was your personality. And I was initially attracted to you right from the beginning. And I remember in the early days of our just getting to know you in college, I really hoped that you, in a way, were everything that I imagined you to be. And the more I got to know you, the more I loved you. And that's why after a couple of years at Furman, where you were just my best friend, I just knew that I had to know if you had any interest in me at all. I knew you did as a friend, but like you say, you were busy, focused on your career and your future and all that. And I was busy balancing the bell curve. So you stayed up all the time studying. Zan was a real extrovert and just loved spending time with people. And so her answer to staying an A student while she was spending all this time with Bible study, folks traveling around and having fun, was she'd get back to Furman and just stay up all night to keep her grades up. So that was that side of the bell curve. So I was busy on the other side of the bell curve. Me and my buddies played golf almost every day because we could walk to the golf course right behind the Furman campus.
You can play baseball.
Yeah, and I played college baseball. So I was busy balancing the bell curve. I put you where you are. If it wasn't for people like me, you wouldn't be. Think about it. How would they differentiate if everybody was an A student? It'd be a real mess. So I did my part. But I tell you, the thing that I love about you the most is your walk with Christ. I know that you're always centered there, and I know now and then, like anybody, you have your ups and down days, but I know that you love the Lord, and I know that God will continue to work in your heart.
I think somebody gave us the advice, and it's good advice when you're looking for a spouse, I guess, looking for a husband or wife, to run hard after Jesus. And when you turn and look beside you and you find somebody running right there with you,
yeah,
that may be the person for you.
And I think that really does define our relationship, because we're both pursuing the Lord. It's interesting. I was just looking through some verses this morning about marriage, and there's that one where right after God creates woman, he commands the man to leave and cleave. And you were talking earlier about how you had to leave your preconceptions about what your future would be.
Right. Well, I had to leave my vision for my life that I had worked so hard on.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to leave that and pick up a new vision.
Yep.
And I think it's important. I just think it's important that you stay in tune with the Lord, because sometimes we're traveling down one path, just like Saul was going down one path, and God knocked him off his horse and called him to Christ. So.
Well, and for my side, the thing I had to leave, I think, was my almost complacency about my future. In a way, I was enjoying college and being single and all that stuff. And the thing that a man has to leave is understanding that he will be providing for a family. And that's a big, high calling scripturally. And he will be required to leave and cleave. He'll be required to provide. He'll be required to, start all over again. I think sometimes kids, when they first get married, they assume that they're going to instantly have everything their parents had. And the studies have shown really since World War II that when couples get married, it is not a step up financially or any other way. It's interesting. My mom and dad's generation, though, it was a step up when they got married. Daddy said they never had indoor plumbing, either he nor his bride, until they got married, and they lived in an apartment. It had central heat, no longer had a potbelly stove. So really, it was a step up when they got married.
Dad, just so you know, just turned 99.
Yeah.
So the man has lived a long time.
He has
seen, a lot of things.
Yeah, but we've talked about it. I think kids today sometimes start their marriage and want to have everything their parents had right away without realizing where their parents started. And, that's right. But it's an initial test of the relationship, because the deal is, for the sake of this intimate relationship, a husband and wife leave and cleave. They literally leave lots of things in order for the cleaving part, which is awesome.
For the clinging part, yes.
Yeah. So it's a spiritual journey that Adam was on. It's a spiritual journey that certainly everybody faces in their relationship.
So one thing I wanted us to talk about, well, it's funny because now that we have grown kids that have children of their own, and we see how hard they're working with homeschooling, and it's just, life is just so crazy for them. Our life is a little crazy because we're traveling and working all the time, and we love our grandkids, and we spend an inordinate amount of time with them. And so sometimes we feel like we're meeting ourselves coming and going. But in the busy part of your marriage, it is really easy to lose sight of each other. And so one thing that somebody shared with me was that I needed every day just to take 5 or 10 minutes out of that day twice to pray for you. Now, this was in the day where people didn't work at home. And so, and you traveled a lot. And so that was really important for me to keep your needs in front of me and praying for you, because it was easy for me to feel sorry for myself when I was home with the kids and you weren't coming home, even though I really appreciated your work and supporting us in homeschooling. But I will say that homeschooling, as we said earlier, introduces a whole new level of stress into a marriage. And you can choose to embrace that and work through it, or you begin to resent each other. And the minute you begin to resent each other, you're going down this slippery slope. So we thought Joe and I would share, to keep it real, we thought we might share the biggest fight we ever had, which was over homeschooling, and the funniest fight we ever had. And because when you live in proximity with somebody for over 40 years, you're going to have great times and you're going to have fights. So after, most of you know my story by now, that I was threatened with jail when we started homeschooling. So that first year, I felt like I told the world we were homeschooling, and we were committed to homeschool for 1 year just to get our oldest son ready for first grade at his prime. Well, then in the middle of the year, I really sensed the Lord is calling us to homeschool again. Joe had been a reluctant homeschool dad. And so I think, what was your rousing,
You can't mess a kid up in 5-year kindergarten.
Yep. So that was how we got into homeschooling.
That was my initial grand vision for home education.
I couldn't mess up the kids too bad. But he did tell me he loved me, and he knew how much I loved the kids, and he respected my walk with the Lord, and he knew I was hearing from the Lord. So he was very supportive, even though he thought I'd lost my mind. When we started homeschooling, we didn't know anybody in the world was homeschooling. And so we get to this second year of homeschooling, and I had told his parents and my parents. His parents were not happy about us homeschooling. And so the only thing I told Joe, the only thing I asked of him was that he tell his parents that we were going to homeschool the next year. I did not want to have to break the news to them. So he said, okay, I got it. So this is May. So we get to the end of June, and I tell Joe, now remember, you need to tell your parents that we're homeschooling this year. This was the big deal. And okay, I got it. End of July. Your parents are taking a trip to Europe in a week. And when they come back, we'll have started homeschooling. And so I need you to tell them. Okay. So then I get a call from his mom saying, hey, we're having a surprise birthday party for Earl, Joe's dad, and we want y'all to come. It's the night before we're leaving. I said, oh, that'd be great. And I called Joe and I said, you have one night left to tell your parents we're homeschooling, and now their surprise birthday party. And so he said, that's okay. We'll be at the party together. And then, I don't know, then he was going to stay and tell him. So then I get a call from Joe. You're not going to believe this. I've got clients in town from California, and I don't know when I'm going to get to the party. I said, okay, but you still got to tell them tonight.
Yeah, I had to play golf with them. I said that.
That's right. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Had to.
You had to play golf. Yes.
Ordered by my boss.
That's right. Well, and that was really true. I'm sticking with that you would have abandoned me.
I'm sticking with that.
So we're getting ready. Ty and John are 4 and 6 or 5 and 7. And Ty was always the real gregarious one at that point. And John was quieter, which he is not now. But so I took Ty aside before we left. I said, Ty, there are 2 things we're not going to tell Granddaddy tonight. We'd gotten him a sweater. I said, when you hand him his present, don't say, Granddaddy, here's your sweater. Let him open it. And the second thing is, we're not talking about where you guys are going to school next year. Well, why, Mama? We love homeschooling, Ty said. And I said, well, because, you know that Grandmammy and Granddaddy are not crazy about homeschooling. And so we're going to let your dad tell him. Okay. So we get in the car. We go to Joe's parents' house, which is like 5 minutes from our house. And John says, little John, 5-year-old sweet little John, says, Mommy, can I take Granddaddy's present in? I said, sure. So we go in, and there are 50 people there in that. I mean, it seems like there are 1,000 people there, but there were between 40 and 50 people there for this surprise birthday party. Earl comes out, and he's surprised. And John hands his present to Granddaddy, and he says, Granddaddy, there are only 2 things I'm not supposed to tell you tonight. What we got you for your birthday and where we're going to school this year. And so Ty speaks up and says, Granddaddy, why do you hate homeschooling so much? We all love it. And I'm there without Joe. So thankfully, one of Joe's sister's friends, took the ball and ran with it and sort of turned the light off of us. But
so see through John, I did tell him. So I come back from playing golf about that time, and I pull in the driveway and I look into the window.
We're still at the party.
Yeah, Zan and the boys are still at the party, and we make eye contact. And it's sort of like when you're in the wild and you see a bear or mountain lion or something, they say, don't make eye contact. It was that scenario. Well, I made the mistake of making eye contact, and I could read what was going on. I knew it was bad. I wasn't sure of the details. So I started walking toward the front of the house, and Zan came running out by me and got in the car. And she's on the way out. She said something like, bring the boys home when the party's over or something. So she left and went home. And I knew I was in trouble. Didn't know the full extent of it. So I brought the boys home and decided to put them to bed. And it was the most spiritual putting to bed you've ever heard. You know, I think I told the whole biblical story starting in Genesis, and focused on how much the boys should love their mom and how great she is and all this kind of stuff. Very loud so she could hear me, thinking, hey, maybe maybe something in there will cause her to forgive this whole situation. By then, I knew what had happened. So after I put them to bed,
it was bad. It was bad.
It was bad. It was very But you know,
Still not funny.
if you wait to the last minute, it only takes a minute. So waiting to the last minute in that situation created an avalanche of pain and suffering. So
Me.
I decided to sit on the front porch. We had these rocking chairs. I decided to sit out there. I thought distance may be the safer way to go. And just kind of waited out. But I was wondering how long I was going to have to wait. So finally, Zan came out of the house, went and got into the minivan. Of course, we had the government-issued minivan that all homeschoolers have. And, you know, we're a conservative, Calvinistic, theological family. Of course, all of our closest friends have always been charismatic. But Zan gets in the car and basically speaks in tongues as she's beating on the steering wheel. In other words, whatever she was saying was inaudible and muffled due to the fact that the car doors were shut. And she drove off, and I wondered, will I ever see her again? I thought, well, I know she loves the kids, and she didn't take her clothes with her, so this could end okay.
So what I was thinking was, I just needed a little bit of space because I was so mad at Joe. And I wasn't at the point where I could even discuss it. But I couldn't let either of our parents know that we were fighting. I mean, I just figured this was between us. We didn't need to make this public. And it was about homeschooling that nobody was excited about anyway. And so
you had no work.
That's right. And so I couldn't afford a hotel room.
That's right.
So, and I couldn't go to my parents' house. So kind of stuck.
Yep.
And so we...
So I was sitting there on the porch, and I would continue to just sit there. And like probably 30 minutes to an hour later, here comes the minivan back into the driveway. And I thought, oh, what's this going to be, you know? And I was in my mind going through my top 10 list of excuses and, you know, pleading for forgiveness or whatever. And Zan gets out and, you know, comes back in the house like nothing happened. So I got up and went in there and I said, so...
Where'd you go? I went to the grocery store. And I walked around for a little bit, ate some chocolate.
There you go. That's the key.
Chocolate was a key part of it, but I just knew that we didn't want to go to bed that angry and that I needed to forgive Joe. And
some friend of ours has a little plaque over her sink that said, don't go to bed angry, stay up and fight. We tried that a time or two, and I realized there was no benefit in that at all.
No, because I have a lot more energy to fight.
That's right. You're more of a night person. Right. And if I fall asleep during the fight, that creates a brand new fight. So,
but you know, it is true with homeschooling because you've taken on so much as a family and so much as a mom that you are, you know, you're just more tense, or I don't know, there's something about responsibility that can weigh so heavy on you especially just thinking the buck stops here.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, especially in the early days of homeschooling in the 80s, it was like we were doing an experiment. Like you were doing an experiment, really, because I wasn't doing much of if any of the instruction. It's like you're doing this experiment for the first time that you've read about.
with the whole world watching and hoping you'll fail.
That's right. It's like Zan's friend said one time, homeschooling is like building an ark in your backyard and hoping the neighbors won't notice. So that was what the early days of homeschooling
but
were like.
I still say that the hardest part about homeschooling is not all the legal stuff we went through, the threats, wondering when they were going to come to the door and take our kids. I mean, all of that stuff was stressful. But the most stressful part of homeschooling is knowing that the buck stops here. And that if my kids don't do well on the SAT, I can't blame the crummy algebra teacher they had, Algebra 1. Or if there's a character problem, I can't blame the kid they're sitting next to in school. That it's us. It's me and you. And so it's really, that's the hard part of homeschooling. But if you can work through those times together with a united front, it makes your marriage stronger. Now, that doesn't mean there's not going to be conflict. There's going to be plenty of conflict. And you've just got to be, the thing that Joe was so committed to was communication. He'd say, "What's wrong?" I'd say, "Nothing." And he wouldn't let me get away with that. So somebody in the marriage has got to be committed to getting beneath the surface and figure out what's really going on. So we'll share one more fight with you just because marriage is made up of the good times and the bad times. And I think they can be equally important in cementing your relationship. So Joe was on the road a lot and he was home, and we used to have just tons of people over all the time for dinners and support group meetings and those kinds of things. So we had a big crowd coming. And for some reason, and we worked great together as a team. But this day, he decided he needed to tell me how to cook everything. And he's a project manager by training. And how I'd be a little more efficient and consider doing things this way. So I didn't have time to fight. So I just thought, I need to remove myself from this situation for a minute. So I go back in the bedroom.
So she goes... So I saw her go back in the bedroom, and I don't know why. This day I was more ticked than usual.
That's not like you.
Yes, it is so contrary to my basic, fallen nature. So I went back, and the door was shut and locked. And so I tried different levels of pleading with Zan. There was the angry, strategy that wasn't working. Knocking loud wasn't working. Telling her I knew she was in there. Come out. That wasn't working. So then I tried to be really sweet, and I apologized for everything I'd ever done in our marriage. It took a while. And no comment still. So I said, I know what. I'm going to go unlock that friggin' door and get in there. So I went to the closet to get my tools, and I found a screwdriver, and it took me 5 or 10 minutes, and I jimmied that door and got it open and went in there, and she wasn't in the bedroom. And I looked in the bathroom, and she wasn't in there. And there was an open window. That skunk had gone out of the window. So then I thought, well, is she running around outside? And then I went back, and there she was in the kitchen, cooking and happy as she could be.
All by myself without a running commentary of everything I should be doing to get ready.
Oh, well.
So it really is like we said at the beginning, there are two parts of your marriage where the underlying part is how committed are you to the marriage? And we were both all the way in. We knew that divorce was not an option. And so we were committed to working out whatever came out. So there's the work of the marriage, and there's the fun of the marriage. And you've got to have the cake, but you've also got to have the icing.
Thanks so much for being a part of the podcast today. We covered so much great information. I hope you'll stay tuned and listen to us next week when we'll move on to part 2. So thanks for being with us. For more information, you can find me at zantyler.com. Until next time, bye.